It's such a pleasure to look over this beautiful audience and folks all nicely dressed for this special occasion. I'd like to give a special and a warm welcome to our alumni, faculty, emeriti faculty, staff, and students joining us, and several folks who are online. Welcome to this very special occasion, where we are going to honor two of our beloved and longtime professors here at the Mandel School, Dr. Robert Fisher and Dr. Sharon Milligan. Please. All of our guests are special, and in the audience today we have one of those special guests, Dean Cleve Gilmore Emeriti. Dean Cleve, that's wave. And his lovely wife, Linda. I'm Dexter Voisin, and since January of 2022, I have had the distinct honor of serving as Dean at the Mandel School here at Case Western. Now, you're in for a treat today. Rob and Sharon are going to give a 2.5 long lecture. I'm just kidding. You know, professors love, you put them in front of the mic, it's hard to pull them away. But they're going to give a joint lecture this afternoon. And many of Rob's family members are here today from all across the country. I met some of them in the receiving line and in the food line. Rob's family, could you just sort of wave to us? Okay. Literally from coast to coast. And Sharon's family is also here. Her grandkids and some of her kids are also joining us on live stream. So, yeah. Now, it's important to note that this occasion marks Sharon's 42nd year of contributions to the Mandel School. 42 years of contributions. Before we move into the Grace Longwell Coyle lecture that Rob and Sharon will present, with the moderator, alumnus Donovan Young, and I just had a full circle moment with Donovan Young. I've been hearing this name Donovan, and this gifted alum who went on to do really important things. And I'm sitting at a table and I said, "You're the Donovan." Okay. So Donovan is going to moderate the Q&A after Rob and Sharon's lecture. But let me tell you a little bit about Grace Longwell Coyle. Born in 1892, Grace Coyle made a profound impact on group work and its practice. Her books and classroom presentations were landmark additions to group work education, contributing to critical analysis of group work leadership, group behavior, and professional education of social work. Now, we've taken a lot of this for granted in terms of group work knowledge, but she was one of the pioneers that really led group work theory and practice forward. Dr. Coyle earned an MA in economics and a PhD in sociology from Columbia University, my alma mater. She worked in settlement houses for several years, but it was for her work at the YMCA that provided her with a platform and a living laboratory where she developed her techniques and her philosophy around group work. In 1934, she joined our faculty here and developed the first course in group work. Now, coincidentally, the CEO and president of the YMCA of Northeast Ohio was honored yesterday during our alumni awards ceremony. So this is a sort of full circle moment, right? Where she went and developed her techniques. So the connection to group work, the connection to agency practice has deep roots here at the Mandel School. Grace Longwell Coyle was the first professorship to be established here in the school. And you know, we have about 9 endowed professorships, and this was the very first established in 1965. The lecture in Dr. Coyle's name was established in 2004, and this was made possible through a generous gift by 2 of our late alumni, Professor Anna Fritz. How many folks know that name, Anna Fritz? Yeah? And Dr. Robert Luratig. And a scholarship has also been funded in her name by Norma and Philip Mann. Now, let me tell you a little bit, just a little bit about Rob and Sharon. You could also scan that QR code for folks with the fancy iPhones, and it will give you their whole bibliography. But I'm just going to give you a few of the many, many highlights. Dr. Sharon Milligan joined our school in 1982. Her interdisciplinary research interests target 4 areas: strategies for mediating the impact of COVID on social workers within the healthcare system, definitely knowledge that we need during these times, and within social work education. Understanding the experiences of women, minorities, and elders living with chronic illnesses. Evaluating conditions and assets in low-income Black communities and the engagement of residents. And the engagement of African Americans in clinical trials and other research endeavors to inform primary and secondary interventions. That's a mouthful. Let me take a deep breath after that, okay? Dr. Robert Fisher joined our school in 2001. He leads a range of evaluation research studies and teaches evaluation methods to graduate students in our social work curriculum and nonprofit management. He's also co-director of the Center on Poverty and Community Development. Since 2001, he has led the center's research on Invest in Children, a county-wide childhood initiative that includes home visiting, children's health, and childcare components. Dr. Fisher is also director of our Master of Nonprofit degree program, and for the past 2 years, we've been working alongside each other as our school's chair, the chair of our visiting committee. And I've gotten to know Rob, steering committee, Rob a little bit more closely during these past 2 years. Now, at this time, I'd like to invite Rob and Sharon to present the Grace Longwell Coyle Lecture. Could you please join me in welcoming them?
First, I'd like to express gratitude to Dean Busan and the Mandel School community for sponsoring this public gathering or celebration for the current holders of the Grace Longwell Coyle Chair. And then thank you, Dean Busan, for sharing the legacy of Grace Coyle, the person for whom this chair is named, because I want to also refer back to it as well in my remarks. The first, I want to share with you the legacy of group work theory and practice at our school, particularly as we've developed our course and thought about our curriculum. And also, you'll find that the contributions of first Grace Coyle as well as the holder of the Grace Coyle Chair, the first holder of the Grace Coyle Chair, who's also called herself a second-generation social group worker. I think it's because she often knew Grace Coyle and others who were part of helping us to understand what social group work was. And then I'd like to end with how this legacy continues today in our MSW curriculum through our innovative faculty leaders. We could think of them as the social group work descendants of Coyle and of the person that I want to emphasize in my 15 minutes, Ruby Purnell. So let's get started. So I'd like to introduce some of you to Ruby Beatrice Purnell, who is a part of our school from 1968 to 1983. She was the first Grace Longwell Coyle Chair at Case Western Reserve University. And as the story goes, when she was ending her time in India, it was Herman Stein, who was a former dean of the school, that met her in India and asked her, would she be interested in coming to Case Western Reserve as a Grace Coyle Chair? Ruby was a major contributor to social group work knowledge and values and skills for over 55 years. Through her work in settlement houses and youth programs, through her participation in numerous boards and committees around the globe, her teaching at the University of Minnesota, which is where she came from before going to India, to be a UN designee in social work. And through her, and then, of course, coming to Case Western Reserve, as well as her visiting professorships at universities such as the Atlanta University, the University of Denver, as well as the University of Washington at Seattle. And also through the training workshops and short courses in many parts of the world, many countries, just to name a few, in Britain, in Jamaica, in India, Germany, and Canada, as well as Sri Lanka. She published and presented widely on group work, social development, public policy, youth, as well as international understanding. Ruby became a social worker in 1944, but in her professional life, she started by working in the State Department and often worked in other parts of the world as she progressed, not only as a part of the State Department of the United States, but also as a social worker and professor within universities. She, in fact, got her PhD in 1959 from the London School of Economics and her MSW at the University of Pittsburgh. And it was actually through the University of Pittsburgh that I realized that the contributions of Ruby Purnell, as well as Grace Coyle and others. In her domestic and international work, she worked side by side with many people, and lots of young people, around the issues that affect their development. She was a consultant for group work in Germany in 1951, not long after the war. By the time, though, that Ruby arrived at Case Western Reserve in 1968, well, you know, there was a lot going on in terms of social unrest, but also she was experiencing what one could call some concerns about social group work. At that point, and slightly before, the social group work organization that she was the founder of merged with what was called a generalist organization called the National Association of Social Workers. And group work was sort of at a paradoxical time. On one side, group workers had a strange identification with the profession, or had a strong identification with the profession. Some would say strange, but the profession engaged in what was called a generalist perspective, meaning inclusive of all ways in which social workers might find themselves working and universities might find themselves engaged in social work education. But you had, at that point, a tension in our profession in terms of what was most prestigious. Was it direct practice? Was it community practice? Was it social work with groups? What was important? And at this point, being a part of a national association was serving the purpose of elevating the profession beyond being an organization, or at least group work, beyond being an organization that was interested in leisure activities, pro-social activities as it relates to social work practice. Now, on the other side, there was a mounting concern that group works had been shortchanged and swallowed up. That is the social work group that she had helped found, Ruby helped found, the Association of the Advancement of Social Work Groups, was being swallowed up by the National Association, or NASW, when it merged with it in 1955. NASW represented all the professions, again, and through this merger, social work had moved closer to what was called problem-oriented agencies, away from the more leisure time activities and more recreational activities and organizations such as the YWCA. Now, social work knew that working with clients with groups had some value, but it worried whether it was going to be valued enough by psychiatrists and by family therapists to recognize their work. As a result, the focus in social work was moving toward more illness and away from health and coping or social action. Now, in Ruby's papers and through interviews, Ruby spoke about how these changes impacted social work education and social work practice. And Ruby remembered in her papers the arguments and the passion surrounding them. After Ruby retired from Case Western Reserve, she spoke about this, quote, "At this point, I remember being absolutely furious when I realized that despite the fact that the chair of the master's program had a group work background and the chair of the curriculum committee had a group work background, they had agreed with the elimination of a course that was entitled Group Process as a requirement for all students. The movement in the school was toward more direct practice, sort of like a either or kind of perspective. And group work courses, the one group work course that was offered was deemed to be an elective course in the MSW program. But for Ruby, that was not enough. After Ruby retired in 1983 from Case Western Reserve, she continued to write and speak on social group work, as well as volunteering with the organization that she has started in terms of social work for groups. A review of her papers tell us a lot about what she found to be important in reflecting upon group work practice. She wrote a lot about reestablishing social group work as an important knowledge and skill area in social work education and practice. And probably one of the most important things for Ruby was this notion or the reestablishment of the group work organization as a separate organization from the National Association of Social Workers. Now, in 1968, she wrote about the powerful and distinctive concepts that were important in terms of the early development of social group work. And these seemed to her to have some potential in terms of thinking about group work going forward. At least they were slightly different from the more common concepts of the dominant social casework of the early era of social work. So to her, she believed words were important. So you'll notice in a lot of her work, her writing, she gave lots of definitions because words are important and they have meaning. And for her, she wanted to define what it means to be a member of an organization as opposed to a client or a patient in the helping process. She emphasized the concept of doing with versus doing for. She wanted us to think about doing versus talking about doing. Activities and other primary agents in the helping process versus the worker alone as the agent of change. Personal development and social contributions as legitimate professional foci. And finally, health and strength-based practice versus sickness and breakdown. Now, this is part of the conversation not only here at our school, but it's also a part of the conversation within social work education and social work practice. And she could see that at one point we were pulling back from this. But just looking at her papers in 1999, Ruby could see that sometimes concepts go in circles. Sometimes practice goes in circles. And she could see the profession turning back to the concerns of socialization, health of individuals throughout the life cycle, and their interactions to the shifting social milieu. She said, quote, "In a world characterized by diversity, novelty, the normal process of growth and development is problematic. Life's development crisis periods intensify their demands on individuals for successful resolution. We often move in and out of occupational and social relationships, and that makes everyday life of each individual a hazardous journey." Now, the challenge to us in social work was to basically think about how we were going to interact with people within society. And it was going to be inclusive of the notion of being able to work not only in terms of health and illness, but also to help people in the helping process that may need more than thinking about health and illness, but even health within chronic illness. Well, I can tell you that in 1999, Ruby could see the change was coming back to the original notion of group work and seeing group work as an important part of practice. She did pass away in 2001. And as we know, the profession of social work has continued to reflect upon how it fits into society and the professional and helping world. More than 20 years later, she died in 2001. We can think, I want to move forward, at least 20 years forward. And I have to say that within our school, we've thought a lot about what is social work, practice, and education, and what's important in terms of that process. All facilitated by our competencies that are now part of the Council of Social Work Education, what we call CSWE, and also impacted by our own thinking about competencies as it relates to social work. And I have had the privilege of working alongside those who actually continue Ruby Purnell, Grace Coyle's legacy, social work in general, and many of these are historical figures in terms of social work practice. But remember when I said that Ruby had this experience of seeing the required course becoming an elective course? Well, today, I have to tell you, and I wondered if most of our audience would know this, is that we now have a required course for group work. And it's entitled Group Theory and Practice. It's a required course for all of our students. And the use of group work principles and techniques are embedded. I can tell you, in every one of our classes, you no longer have the professor walking to the front of the room, entering the room, and starts to talk and give a lecture, and then the students ask the questions. We have much more an interactive process in terms of our academic program. And incorporating social group work techniques and principles in the way we teach, and not just in the way in which we provide one required course. So we're all building our group work skills in the context of socializing and interacting with the students that are in the classroom. Now, I said I have the privilege of engaging in this process, but as a school, we have a team of innovative faculty leaders in the MSW curriculum that have led this charge. And of course, I can't forget the fact that we also had a lot of alums that have been interested in this process. This process has been led by Zoe Greenwood, who officially is our director of the Office of Outcome Assessment, but she is the lead instructor of the course, the SAS 509 that I shared with you in the earlier slide, the SAS 509 Group Theory and Practice. She's in collaboration with Margie Edouard, who is the co-chair of the curriculum committee. Remember back in the 70s and the 80s, a little bit of upsetness on the part of Ruby in terms of why are these people in the curriculum committee voting against this required course? And so Margie Edouard, as well as David L. Hussey, who also co-chairs the curriculum committee, have led us in this movement to think about the vertical and as well as horizontal integration of the curriculum, but also the use of our group work and group work skills in terms of the school. Finally, Mark Chupp has been a part of that team of leadership. He has been involved up until recently, he led the area of community practice, but he's very much a part of our committee. So these four people have done so much in terms of moving us forward. Now, I have to say that and emphasize that this has all been approved and supported by our faculty at the Mandel School. And in many ways, it has led us to think about the notion of how we move toward a more advanced course in group work practice. And we have thought a lot about how we might be able to use to help in this advanced course, research-supported group therapies. There are these databases now that academics are developing where you can look at the diagnosis and then you can all find all kind of information in terms of outcome studies, treatment manuals, worksheets for group work and group therapy. And our faculty are working and thinking about what that course would look like. So I know I'm probably running out of time, but I do want to mention, I want to thank you for faculty leaders for your persistence, led by Zoe, Margie, David, and Mark Chupp. And again, many alumni and many friends. The legacy of social group work is alive and well at the Mandel School and in the profession of social work. And I suspect that Grace Coyle and Ruby Purnell are very pleased. Thank you for your attention.
I don't have any slides, so if you're expecting to see your photo up here, I hate to break it to you. I'm not showing any more pictures. Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate with Sharon and me. I'm really honored by this recognition and by your presence here. It's actually very sweet to me to be named a Coyle professor alongside Sharon, as she and I have been colleagues for now 20 plus years, and we had overlapping leadership at the Center on Urban Poverty and Community Development. As a young academic, I always saw achieving an endowed chair as a pinnacle of sorts, but with a degree of irreverence. My old friend, Dr. John Barker, and I spent countless hours lampooning our senior faculty at Vanderbilt, offered respite from our dissertations. Some of you know that I pen jokey farewell briefs to individuals who leave the Poverty Center. In one, I referred to myself as the holder of the IKEA chair at the Mandel School because I had recently purchased a nice desk chair from IKEA. Little did I know that one day I would receive a legitimate title tonight. Also, having been promoted to full professor in the last year has begged the question, full of what? Let's leave that question to another time. This recognition has prompted me to delve more deeply into the career of Grace Coyle, as you've heard about from our prior speakers. I knew of her as a Mandel luminary and the mother of social work group work. I did not fully appreciate all that she had done. You heard that she was an interdisciplinary scholar, trained in economics and sociology. She had a certificate in philanthropy from the New York School of Philanthropy. She led major national organizations during her career, and she wrote extensively about social process and organized groups. This included both formal and informal associations in social settings. She studied things like how groups form and determine their membership, how their structure evolves, the role of leadership and the process of communication, the development of esprit de corps and the process of collective action. In her 30-plus years at Mandel, Grace Coyle authored multiple books on these issues and changed the way the field thought about groups and organizations. Now, how does that tie to my work? Well, before going there, let's go back to 1915, when 18 philanthropic organizations of Cleveland issued a report concluding that there is, quote, in Cleveland, a need and an opportunity for a school to teach sociological sciences, and called on Western Reserve to launch a school focused on this work. They said, Cleveland, with its great and varied business activities, its cosmopolitan population, and its rapid growth, is a fitting place to teach the sociological sciences and to train in social work. No informed Clevelander will admit that any city has, on the whole, more advanced, varied, or active philanthropic institutions, municipal or private, or a more efficient fabric of social organizations working for the common welfare. And it is justly so. That call from the community was answered just 1 year later in 1916 with the launch of the School of Applied Social Sciences. And that marked the first university-linked School of Social Work program in the world. Early on, courses were offered in municipal government, sociology, social institutions, child and family needs, as well as things like labor and the factory system, work with families, and curriculum in the administration of social legislation, household administration, charity administration, and get this, playground management. Something my wife knows a lot about as a preschool teacher. All this maximized one of the program's key concern, and that was organizational management. So from the get-go, teaching about organization's concerns and management were at the forefront of the school's mission. Over time, as the social work profession grew and changed, courses were expanded to focus more on case management and social psychology. Now flash forward to the 1980s, the school joined with others to create a first-of-its-kind standalone master's degree in nonprofit management, a program which migrated to the Mandel School in 2012 when I was fortunate enough to become the chair. Nonprofits are the fruit of the work of groups, people who voluntarily come together around a civic issue. Many initiatives begin informally with loose financial arrangements, based in basements and garages, relying entirely on volunteers. As time passes, founders often seek more durable structures that can scale up the work as need demands. This means shifting to an organizational structure that has a legal identity and recognition by the state, the so-called 501c3, the nonprofit. It's important to note that across the globe, the term nonprofit is distinctly American, owing to our worldview steeped in market economy frameworks. Around the world, terms like non-governmental organization, charity sector, or civil society are more the norm, based on different trajectories of societal development. With increased formalization of a nonprofit's work comes increased funding and increased expectations. This means being accountable to various stakeholders, funders and supporters, partners, and the community being worked with. Yes, financial accountability exists as a basic threshold, but beyond that, there's a need to document the actual effects on the social issue being addressed. Your nonprofit that distributes free books to children is wonderful. You need to show that you, in fact, bought books and distributed them, and they were received by families with children, but we also should ask, did the books get read, and how often? And did these children actually have better reading performance as they entered school? My work has focused on answering questions like these and about whether programs do what they say and bring about the outcomes desired. The evaluation of social programs is part reality check and part exploration, and often leads to unanticipated findings. A study that we carried out through the Poverty Center with my colleague David Crampton, who's here in the room, worked looking at families experiencing homelessness who also happened to have a child taken into county custody. Past research had shown that these families in particular their children had much longer stays in out-of-home placement compared to families who didn't have housing instability. We studied a new program aimed at addressing housing needs in the hopes that it would reduce children's stays in county custody. That was the main outcome. Using an experimental design, we followed several hundred children, some whose families got the new model, some who received existing services. At the end, we determined that children from both groups had essentially the same length of time in care. A dispiriting result for the partners, to be sure. Upon further analysis, though, we found an important difference by race. Black children whose family got the new model were much more likely to exit care to return home to their family of origin, as opposed to exiting by going to a relative or adoption. In a system with major racial disparities, this finding was surprising and a game changer, and led the Child Welfare Agency to examine how to export the model and embed it in regular services to increase the likelihood that black children would go home to their family of origin more often. As I reflect on my work over the years, I wanted to share 3 observations in my remaining time. First, let's let nonprofits be nonprofit. You often hear folks say that nonprofits should be run more like businesses. This seems to tie back to our belief that for-profits are best at producing efficiency and effectiveness in what they do. It also is, again, a distinctly American impulse owing to our deeply rooted beliefs in the power of the free market. Though I respect the aim here, I feel compelled to note that this operate more like a business advice is only totally feasible if nonprofits, and you can boo at the end of each of these, nonprofits paid competitive wages to their staff, which they don't. Nonprofits are able to invest heavily in marketing and outreach, which they can't. Nonprofits can attract upfront equity and hold financial reserves, which they aren't allowed to do. Nonprofits can do away with heavy reliance on unpredictable volunteers. Unlikely. And lastly, nonprofits can be judged by their performance on only one organizational outcome, like profit. Not possible. These dimensions suggest a fundamental difference between nonprofits and their for-profit counterparts. Nonprofits often exist because the for-profit sector has already determined that the work cannot be done and also be profitable. Where markets and government fail us, nonprofits are usually the solution. So let nonprofits be nonprofit. Second, let me state the obvious. Every problem in society is worsened by the conditions of poverty. Let's start with the observation that poverty is both a cause and an outcome, depending on the social issue we're considering. Take lead poisoning in children, something we've been working on for the last 5 years here in Cleveland. In Cleveland, our poorest neighborhoods have the highest rates of childhood lead poisoning. The biological threat results from poverty, lower cost rental units in old buildings that have not been maintained or updated. Here, the risk is dominantly from lead paint in properties built prior to '78, not from lead water lines or other sources. Unsurprisingly, these are the same neighborhoods that were redlined in the 1930s and have been significantly disinvested in the intervening years. These areas are disproportionately populated by families of color, so lead poisoning is a burden borne mainly by children of black families. Here we observe that poverty is a cause. Now, lead-poisoned children, our studies show, go on to exhibit worse academic problems, more juvenile justice involvement, and lower earnings as young adults. The legacy of lead poisoning for many children in poverty is an altered trajectory, one that includes more risk and less opportunity. As they age, every social system they touch reacts to the issues and challenges they carry with them. These chip away at the odds of lifetime success and prosperity. So here, poverty becomes an outcome. And now, what was that last number you showed me? 3 minutes, skipping ahead. I had some good quotes here. The reality is we know how to reduce poverty, as we famously cut child poverty by 50% in 2021 through the use of child tax credits, only to have it return to the same previous levels upon their expiration. The challenge is broader. How we view those in poverty and whether their state is owing more to structural causes or their own decisions. This is a dialogue in policy spaces that is informed by worldview, personal experience, and faith tradition. My work has focused on illuminating the conditions associated with poverty and evaluating programs focused on lessening its consequences. And my third point, coming around the bend, stay with me. Data don't have to be big to be useful. Most questions of practical importance in the social sphere demand better data. One stream of work focuses on collecting or creating better data, so-called primary data collection. For many decades, other data have been locked away, residing within the many organizations, government and nonprofit, that were serving families. With the advent of improved technology and cheaper data storage, roughly since 2002, these data have become more available for use in answering important questions. Over the last quarter century, the Poverty Centers created an integrated data system on all children living in Cuyahoga County, linking together individual electronic records from 35 different organizations. Think birth certificates, child welfare involvement, lead testing, public assistance, food assistance, school records, homeless services. The list goes on. And this allows examination of how a system of services supports and interacts with a population of families. Keep in mind, these data were created by organizations at great expense to manage their operations. Not for research, but they still hold tremendous value. In that sense, this is the ultimate version of recycling, repurposing existing secondary data to answer new questions of importance. We've studied things like the degree to which children served by child welfare also show up in juvenile justice. We've looked at the degree to which children served in high-quality preschool environments arrive at kindergarten more prepared. And we've studied how the quality of a child's housing in their first years of life relate to the odds of lead poisoning and subsequent academic and social issues. By some standards, these data are big, millions of individual records and hundreds of thousands of variables. By comparison, the average smartphone user generates around 40 exabytes of data every month. An exabyte is 1 quintillion bytes. That's big data, but I'm not suggesting we study it. My point, big data in the social realm is an opportunity, but it may not provide a quick answer. This takes time to determine. For most organizations, it's an evolutionary process where we have to figure out what the right questions are, assess the data we have, and if needed, field new data collection. This is a process that ties closely to things like internal data culture, role of leadership, external pressures. The work of Grace Coyle would be of great help to us here. This brings me to the end of my remarks. Thank you for your kind attention. And again, I'm honored to be recognized in this way. ChatGPT suggested that I end my remarks with, "Together we can continue to make an impact." I prefer to close with the words of the father from the Christmas Story movie, who said, "This is a major award." Thank you. So now we would like to welcome Mr. Donovan Young, who is a double alumnus of this school with a Master's of Science in Social Administration and a Master of Nonprofit Organizations, to join us to interview Sharon and I. Sharon and I teamed up to make Donovan be willing to do this, but he was very generous with his time and willingness to do this, so that we're going to have a conversation. Thank you for being here, and join us at the chairs. Sharon.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Donovan Young. I, as you all can see up there, graduated dual degree class of 2021, and it's nice to be back at the Mandel School. I was thinking as I was preparing for this with the M&O courses and it being a weekend, I was like, wow, that reminds me of the intensive weekend classes that we had. And some days, no, I'm kidding. But that being said, the lessons that I learned there, I still see the fruits of day to day in my 9-to-5 job. And then with you, Dean Milligan, even though I didn't have a course with you, I remember when the Hate U Give movie came out. And even though I wasn't able to make the screening, you had hosted a few of my colleagues over at your home to debrief the movie. So that being said, both the inside the classroom and the outside of the classroom contributions have definitely been fruitful for myself and many others. Congrats again to you both on this prestigious award. So to get into the questions here, you both have been affiliated with the Center on Poverty and Community Development in your time at Mandel. So Dr. Fisher, I'll start with you. You took over as co-director of the center when Dean Milligan moved on to take the Associate Dean of Academic Affairs and Student Services position back in 2007. What do you see in the study of poverty that connects to Grace Longwell Coyle's innovation and group work?
I feel like I already covered that.
One more time for the people in the back.
Well, for me, what's really striking about what she brought to the field was, I mean, just fully acknowledging the power of groups, of individuals. And so much of what we see in our neighborhoods that have kind of persistent poverty issues is, that a lot of those connections have to be re-nurtured for households to feel successful and for those neighborhoods to see a new future for themselves. So I think we've now kind of integrated a lot of, and I'll let Sharon knows a lot more about this than I do, but we've integrated some of that really important ways of thinking about groups into a lot of our regular practice in social welfare generally. I just think that there's so much power to be had. I know that a lot of policymakers, a lot of funders think, well, we can just airdrop a program into these neighborhoods that are in despair, and that'll be the solution. But we already know that the solutions that emanate from those groups in neighborhoods where there's co-ownership, that there's real power, there's much more sticking power and much more effectiveness when the groups in those naturally occurring communities, are part of that process. So, I see a lot of hope there.
Being that I work in philanthropy, that felt a little personal. I kid. I kid, but I agree. Thank you for your remarks on that. Dean Milligan, so in the last 16 years, your career has led you to work more, with faculty, staff, and students, like myself when I was a student here a few years ago, and administering the graduate programs and chairing the now MSW program. What do you see in your current position that connects to the Grace Coyle Chair in Group Work?
So, can you hear me? Okay, so I've got it going. All right. The whole notion, I think I tried to describe a little bit of that in terms of the relationship between faculty and also our work with each other in terms of thinking about the development of our curriculum. And that was really a group effort in every way. And also, in order to be able to have us move from what we were doing before in terms of our curricular design to a new design, it requires some people to have some really good group work skills and helping us to move along and transforming the way in which we taught our courses and the way in which we organize our curriculum. And so I could see the connection between working with, very similar to what we've thought about in terms of communities, working with people, working alongside each other in terms of working and in terms of making the transformation in our curriculum design. And I also wanted to mention that both Mark Chupp as well as Margie Edouard, raise your hands, are in the audience tonight, and they were part of that group that led us along the way. In terms of, they were our master group workers in terms of helping us to think about this. And I also want to mention that our deans, Dean Busan as well as Dean Gilmore, were very much in support of our activities and our shenanigans in terms of trying to think about how we might change the curriculum around in the school. So I see some group workers or people who, and some of us who have had group work experience using our skills every day in terms of being a part of the MSW program and the M&O program in the school.
Wonderful. Thank you both. There is a strong intersection between social work leadership and nonprofit leadership in the degree programs at the Mandel School. What do you see social workers bring to leadership roles that differ from leaders from other disciplines?
Well, one of the things we've experienced is it's not either or, it's both and. So we have about how many? 20%, 30% of our students that are both dual degree?
The dual degree?
Yeah.
It's 15.
15? Oh, okay, a little bit less now. So it's not, what happens in our school is that we have this opportunity for students to do dual degrees as well as a certificate in nonprofit. So a student can walk out of our institution with the capacity to work within human service agencies and within civil society. And so this is a both-and situation where it's not either or within our degree programs.
Well, anything you'd like to add, Dr.
I think I'd add that, across the country and really the globe, schools of programs in nonprofit management are in schools of public administration or business administration. So we're unique in that we're a school of social work that also hosts this program. And I get asked all the time, well, what difference does that make? Does that affect things? The environment here is totally different. It's not just about, it's certainly about having the passion for the mission that we're all about, the changing stuff, really important. It's the passion you feel when you get social workers and nonprofit management students together. But then it's also it's something about interpersonal actions. So if you're raised up in a business school or a school of public administration, you're going to have different priorities. But our students learn a lot about, call it leadership, call it being a good person with others, a good group member, not just being the leader today, but being a good follower in groups and staying focused on what we're trying to do together. So I think that is imbued, if a student comes into the M&O program and they're not a social worker, they're not being trained in social work, they still benefit from this environment that is different from a lot of other schools. So I'm proud that we have several dozen M&O alums out there leading important organizations just in this region, and we have folks with the MSSA or MSW from Mandel also as executive directors of organization. That tells me that there is this contagion of leadership training across the two programs.
Thank you. Anything you'd like to add? All good? All right, cool. Wanted to double back.
I do want to add one thing.
There we go.
Okay, all right. Sorry. One of the things, though, in social work is that we think a lot about, not only about values, and I think, that's probably true of the whole program, both degree programs, but we learn a lot about human development and human diversity, as well as practice and what that might look like in various sectors, because social workers do operate in the various sectors in our society and across the globe. And so, but I think that human development piece is just something that you just can't sort of breathe in. You've got to really begin to think about and study and also realize, which is what Ruby Purnell said something about, just living in the society, living within the world. There are some hazards that we have to all navigate. And I think that this is a piece that, as well, is not, it doesn't have to be that difficult, but there are traumas and there are things that people are dealing with within a society. And I think that is an important part that makes the social work degree a very different degree from the M&O.
Thank you both. You both have strong ties to philanthropy in your careers through service and research as well. What comments do you have on the role of philanthropy in promoting social change in the context of changing civil society structures and political environments?
Well, one of the things that we both experienced is that philanthropy has helped us to think about the partnership between the various sectors, and to the point where philanthropy has also suggested that this be a focus for the work that we do at many points in times. But also, in some ways, I'm just thinking about Steve Mentor, who was the CEO of the Cleveland Foundation. He was a social worker. He's passed away. He's part of our trailblazers. And just in some of your role in terms of now being engaged in philanthropy, the mere presence of social workers and others within the philanthropic community, I think helps to make the philanthropic community stronger. And we've also experienced that some philanthropies have moved away from the notion of proposing a program to supporting ideas. And meaning they could be ideas from the university or ideas from communities or programs that are attempting to make change that are run by individuals who are part of a community. You know, giving major money to sort of transform what that might look like in terms of the, you know, a theory of change, a way in which you might affect change in a community. So philanthropy has been extremely important, and in times has taken its hands off of what is considered to be a good program.
And I would just add to that, I think philanthropy, so formal foundations are really at their best when they take risk, because, you know, we have government to fund the SAFE program, the proven program. What we don't have is an R&D, you know, version of that. So in a lot of ways, philanthropy funds the pilot program, the really cool idea with unknown possibility. And then if we can show that it works in a pilot phase, then maybe it makes sense for government to step in and scale up. So I think philanthropy is really at best when they're gambling. And I think of the Gun Foundation as, you know, really a standout in terms of willing to take risks, meaningful risks that on great people, great leaders, great ideas. And, you know, we've learned a lot over the last 20, 30 years about, you know, for many foundations, I'm not going to name any, but it was all about who had the most influential board, who'd been around the longest, who had the best name recognition. And that's not who does the best program all the time. Mm-hmm. So we have to, if we have a staid and old boys club kind of mentality in philanthropy, as we had for many years, we're not going to be, you know, investing in the next cadre of leadership in the social sector.
That's well said. That's well said by the both of you. So I have to ask, what do you both plan to do with the physical chairs that you're getting? Like, are they're going to fit in your offices?
It's going to sit in my office. I'm going to put my foot up, or both. I'll let my grandson over there sit in it as I tell him stories about all kinds of things that he's used to be telling him stories about.
I don't know. I got so many piles of paper. I'm going to have to, Amy's going to help me find a place for this beautiful item somewhere of significance.
You're not going to put a box on top of it?
No, nothing. No. Something else will exit the room.
Maybe it'll compete with the IKEA chair. Who knows?
The IKEA chair will leave.
Awesome. So, thank you.
So you can see a little bit, just a snippet of why Sharon and Rob are not only greatly beloved here at the Mandel School, but they've been significant institution builders here at the Mandel School, and so well deserving of the Grace Longwell Coyle Endowed Professorship. So again, we want to thank them for that wonderful lecture. So Rob and Sharon, on behalf of the Mandel School and Case Western Reserve University, I have the distinct honor to present to you both your very own captain's chair as professors who have taught and influenced scores of students who have become alumni, changing our society for a better every day. These captain chairs are engraved with a little So I'm going to read to you what it says on the chairs. Rob's chair includes a title, Grace Longwell Coyle, Professor in Civil Society. And Sharon's is inscribed with the title of Grace Longwell Coyle, Associate Professor in Social Work. So again, congratulations to you both. I'm going to ask Sharon to give a quick 1 minute remark, and Rob a 1 minute, and we're going to hold you to your 1 minute. Okay? Sharon?
Again, I'd like to thank all of you for being here and thank the members of the Mandel community. And also, if my grandson, who's 6'4", would stand up. He's only 14. No, he's 6 foot. Stand up, baby. Okay. And my daughter, who is in the other woman in orange in the room, and my son, who is online. Yes, yes.
Rob?
Just a couple of quick thank yous. I have to start with Claudia Colton, who couldn't be here tonight, but Claudia hired me way back in when, and for her mentorship and friendship over 20 years at the Poverty Center. I want to thank her. I want to thank Dean Boisson for selecting both of us to receive this honor, and former Dean Cleve Gilmore for encouraging me to get on the tenure track, which made this possible. My colleagues, some of which are from the Poverty Center and former colleagues, who without them, none of this work that we've done would have been possible. I also want to thank Dennis Young, who for his support and leadership, particularly around the M&O program over the years and continuing on. My colleagues at Mandel, for providing a very supportive environment over these years. Our M&O students, in particular, our community partners. And then lastly, I would like my family to stand. My siblings, please. First. Okay, all right, down. We're on the clock here. And now my wife, Amy, and my two of my 3 sons are here, and John Barker, and Gracie, would you please stand? And then my friends in the way back, would you stand, please? They're not gonna, all right, thank you for being here. All right, thank you all.
Before we present Rob and Sharon with their flowers, and do some photography, I just want to showcase our upcoming bicentennial, which is going to take place next year. This signals Case Western establishment in 1826. Our university has been a steadfast pillar of education, both locally, nationally, and internationally. And we, along with all of our other schools, are going to be celebrating this bicentennial next year. So we know how to do a good party here at Case Western, and look forward to the biggest of all parties next year. So again, I want to congratulate them, congratulate the family, the friends, the loved ones, and thank all of you who came out this evening and joined us online to celebrate our beloved professors and dear colleagues. So thank you.